Palm Sunday. It is the recognized beginning of what many people refer to as Holy Week. It starts as the day we celebrate the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, as we read earlier. But then the week moves along until it comes to the crucifixion and then the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it is an astounding thing to consider how quickly the hearts of the people in Jerusalem could be swayed from Sunday, when they were cheering Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem, until Friday, when they were screaming for his crucifixion and crying out for his blood to be upon them and upon their children. And I suppose we need to take a pause before we become too judgmental of them and think about how often can we be swayed? How often can we be swayed by our circumstance or by our disappointment or by what we think should happen but doesn't happen, or the timing of what God allows to happen? The Friday of Holy Week is commonly known as Good Friday. And when I was younger, I struggled with that. I was like, why is it called Good Friday when Jesus was crucified? Why would we call it good? Why don't we call it Bad Friday? Why don't we call it Black Friday? No, that's been taken by something else. Now maybe you're like me and you've asked that question. What was good about Good Friday? What is good about Jesus being falsely accused and arrested and tortured? What is good about his disciples being scattered and fearful and left to hide from the authorities? What is good about a mother watching her son die a most horrific death? Maybe you are at a place in your life where you are wondering something similar about your own circumstance. Maybe you are dealing with things being said about you that are mean or untrue. Maybe you are experiencing fear about what is ahead for your life. Maybe you have experienced is the next step in God's plan for your life. If we were only faced with looking at our lives through the events of Friday, we would have no hope. If we were only able to look at the fact that Jesus was arrested, crucified, and buried, we would have no hope. But thankfully, we know the reality of Resurrection Sunday that followed Friday. And that's why we can call Friday good. Friday was good for us because it was the necessary part of God's plan of salvation for us. And it is why that today we can find hope in Good Friday. As we look toward this week unfolding and the events of Jesus' life, I want you to see you have hope because of who Jesus is and what he has done for you. We're going to look at 3 truths this morning that will sustain you when your current circumstance appears hopeless. If you are feeling like, I know I should have hope, but my feelings aren't quite there. If you are at a place in life where you are struggling, where you are battling, I want you to listen to these 3 truths because they will sustain you through this period in your life. The first truth is this. Number 1, God's promises are true. God's promises are true. So often it is too easy for you to focus on only what you're experiencing right now, and we all succumb to that. Many times when we are going through a difficulty, we get locked into that, we get focused on it, and we many times don't see it changing in the near future. In a sense, sometimes we feel like it is always going to be this way. I'm always going to feel like this. But that's where you need to have truth that anchors your soul. You need to know that God's promises are true. They're not just true for other people. God's promises are true for you. This is when you need to know that you can put the full weight of your life into trusting what God has said. God cannot lie. So whatever He says is going to happen, regardless of whether you understand it or not. He doesn't say it's going to happen if you understand it. No, when He says something, it's going to happen whether you understand it or not. It's going to happen whether people believe it or not. His words will not ever fail. The disciples who walked with Jesus saw Him every day, ate with Him, talked with Him. I think they had fun together too. They didn't understand everything Jesus said, even when He plainly said it. Matthew chapter 17, verse 22. And while they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be handed over to men, and they will kill Him. And He will be raised on the third day." And they were deeply grieved. Wait a minute. Let me read it again. The Son of Man is going to be handed over to men, and they will kill Him, and He will be raised on the third day. And they were deeply grieved. Why? Why were they deeply grieved? Well, because they only heard the bad part. They only heard that Jesus was going to be killed. Even though Jesus plainly said, "I'm going to be raised on the third day." And I wonder, what were they listening to? Did they not hear that? Or did they only focus on Jesus was going to be killed and taken from them? Sometimes we suffer from that same lack of understanding. We get caught up in our circumstance or in only hearing one side and not grasping what God has promised was coming next. Jesus didn't say, "They're going to take me and kill me." End of story. He said, "They're going to take me, they're going to kill me, but I will be raised on the third day. I will come back." You would think His disciples would have been rejoicing at that, but they were grieved. No matter what happens to us in this life, it is not the end for the follower of Jesus. No matter what trial may come your way, no matter what challenge may confront you, no matter what difficulty may enter your life, it is not the end point for you. It is only a point in the journey for you. It is kind of like if you go on vacation and you're traveling and you have a long trip ahead of you, and you may have started out with your car, the gas tank full, but you're driving, and you see the needle going down, and at some point you're like, I got to stop and fill the tank back up. Do you know how much it costs to fill the tank of my truck back up? It's not a, I can't wait to get to the gas pump feeling. It's a, oh man, this is going to cost me. But it is only a point in the journey. I'm not staying at the gas station keeping that handle pulled for 20 hours. Likewise, in our lives, things happen. But we are not to be stuck there. We are to be able to look beyond. That's why the Lord tells us that we are to have an eternal focus even as we walk through this life. That's why he tells us that this earth is not our home. We are not stuck here. No matter what occurs on this life here, we have something greater ahead for us than anything we've experienced on earth. God's promise of being with us for eternity. He's with us now, and he will be with us for eternity. Gives us hope. It's his promise. The second truth, God is always at work. God is always at work. Again, we must get beyond locking into our immediate circumstance and trust that God is at work in our situation, even when we don't see something happening. There have been several times in my life where I was in that place, where I was in a place of waiting. And waiting is not always pleasurable. Waiting can wear on you. Waiting can make you wonder. Waiting can sometimes bring doubt into your mind. Well, I know God says this, but I don't know if he's going to do it for me. And it is in that waiting where you don't see anything happening that you have to hold on to this truth. God is always at work. He has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. He is with you. That is his promise. So we got to hold on to his promise. A great example of this is Joseph in the Bible. When I look at Joseph's life, I do not see anything in the progression of his life from the time where God gave him that dream that his brothers and his father would one day bow down to him. Now, you can say, well, he was a little foolish in telling them that, and I would probably agree with you. But God gave him that. And it was many years from when God gave him that before it ever happened. And if you look at Joseph's life from that point when he told his brothers, there was nothing in the progression of his life that made him think it was going to happen. In fact, everything that happened in his life looked like it was taking him further and further and further away from what God had showed him in the dream. I mean, if you have a dream from God and God's like, hey, your brothers are going to bow down to you. And they are arguing whether or not they're going to kill you. That is not the progression. That is not the upward track you're looking for. And when they threw him in the pit, and then the slave traders come by, and one of them says, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him. Well, maybe that's a step up from being killed. I don't know. But he gets sold as a slave. He's taken to a foreign country. Instead of being the favorite in his father's house, he goes to being a slave. As a slave, he's then falsely accused. Even though he worked hard, he worked diligently, he honored God, he was falsely accused and he ends up in prison. And even in prison, he's a faithful worker and he gets promoted. Now, I don't know how much weight you want to put on prison promotions, but whatever it meant, he got promoted. Maybe he got an extra slice of bread. I don't know, but he was on the way up in the prison, but he was still in prison. And Pharaoh's workers come in one day. They're arrested, and he gives an interpretation of their dream. And one of the men is restored into the very presence of Pharaoh and says, I won't forget you. And he does. But God was at work all of the time. Even though Joseph couldn't see what God was putting in place, even though Joseph couldn't see what God was ordaining, even though Joseph couldn't see that God had a timetable that was not Joseph's, even though Joseph couldn't see that God was actually working on his character in preparation for what was coming. And sometimes we are there. Sometimes it is in your waiting that God is building something in you to prepare you for what He has ahead for you. In one day, God moved Joseph from the pit to the palace. In one day. It wasn't a step-by-step progression where I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer. But God was at work every day in Joseph's life, moving him to where He wanted him to be, ordaining the circumstances that needed to happen to bring Joseph to where Joseph needed to be. I mean, think about it. If his brothers had not sold him into slavery, he would have never got to Egypt. If he had not learned all of the things he had learned about the culture that he had been brought to as a captive, he would have not been able to step into the role that he had. But God was at work all of the time. Excuse me. Romans 8:28, verse that we know very well. At the end of, or toward the end of Joseph's life, when Joseph's brothers come and Joseph makes himself known to them, of course they're stunned. And they think they're going to die. They knew they mistreated their brother. And now he had the power of life or death over them. And Joseph makes this statement. While you meant it for evil, God meant it for good. Joseph had learned something about God. He had learned he could trust God and that God was at work in his life even when he didn't see it. And in Romans 8:28 we find these words, and we know. We know. Do you know? Do you know this? Do you know it as a promise of God? Do you know that He's at work? That God causes all things to work together for good to those who love Him and to those who are called according to His purpose. Listen, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you are living your life wanting to honor Him, walking in obedience, doing your best to do what He's asked you to do, you're called according to His purpose. His promise is, no matter what pain, no matter what hurt, no matter what trial comes into your life, He is at work and He's going to turn it to good. You got to hold on to that truth if you're going to have hope. This is something you must know. He is at work turning the tough circumstances into good results. Truth number 3. God has not forgotten you. Going through life's difficulties can often create in us a sense of feeling alone. Many times when we're hurt or wounded or discouraged, we feel like we are the only ones going through it. Many times we will feel no one understands us. Sometimes we will even say it. You can't understand what I'm feeling. And sometimes the result of that is we begin to withdraw. And sometimes we can isolate ourselves. It can be detrimental to us if we do that. Don't do that. Even though you might feel alone, you are not alone. And I want to tell you something. This is one of the reasons why God calls us to be a part of His family. When I say His family, I'm talking about like a local church family. This is one of the reasons why it is so important for you to be involved with other people. And I know over the last few years we have come through a season in our life, not only in our country but around the world, where we were isolated for a time. And you were told, don't congregate with other people. And there are some people who are still stuck in that mind frame. There are still people who are like, I don't want to be around people. In fact, there may be some watching at home right now, and that's where you're at. You're watching at home because you don't want to be with other people. And I want to tell you something. It is God's will for you to be involved with other people in the family of God. We need each other. We need each other. Because if you are someone who's going through a difficult time, you need to know that there's another person you can go to and you can talk to. You need to know that there's someone that you can say, will you pray for me? I am really struggling. And that they won't be judgmental and they won't be talking behind your back, but they will be there for you. You need to know that there are people around that you can share your life with as you walk this journey. You do not need to go through it alone, and you should not go through it alone. Not only do you need that when you are going through a tough time, but you need to be around people to help them. Because there will be periods in your life where someone will come to you and be like, I'm not having a good day. And you can be the voice of encouragement. You can be the voice of hope in their life. And I believe this is one of the reasons why God calls us to fellowship together. Sometimes we do well at it and sometimes we don't. But I want to encourage each and every one of you. If you don't have friendships within the church family, you need to work on it. You need to get involved in doing some things together. We had an egg hunt yesterday, and we had people that came and helped doing different things, and that can build a sense of family. Whether you're passing out drinks, or whether you're helping kids play games, or whether you're helping them unload 3,000 eggs. Many times just being together helps to form a bond and build a relationship. And so if you are someone, again, I'm not trying to be harsh on you, but if you're someone who only comes here on a Sunday morning and that's all you want, you're missing out on what God really wants for your life. He wants you to be involved. Now, are you going to know everybody? Maybe. Depends how friendly you are. But most likely, there will be a small group of people that you will just feel a kinship toward. And that's okay. Now, don't be exclusive. Don't be like, I got my 5, and no one else is allowed in. Don't do that. But man, have healthy relationships with other people. Now, beyond that, you need to know that the Lord Himself has not forgotten you or your situation. Joshua chapter 1, beginning in verse 8. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. You shall meditate on it day and night. Now, I'm not against having like the Our Daily Bread devotionals. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something to be said when you begin to look deep into the Word of God and try to align and say, okay, God, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my life? Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous and you will achieve success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The fact that God had to say, "Do not be terrified or dismayed," means that He knows we will face times in life that threaten to do those very things to us. There are some hard times that come into people's lives, and they will discourage you, and they can make you fearful, and they can cause you to wonder. But that's where we need these truths. Don't be terrified. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. Wherever you find yourself. Wherever you're at. Whatever geographical location you may be on this earth, He's with you. Whatever level of grief or sorrow you are in, He is with you. Whatever challenging circumstance you may find yourself in, He is with you. When you think of Good Friday and all the pain and the hurt and the betrayal and the unfair treatment that happened to Jesus, all of the things that went on in His life, He was a righteous man, did not sin, the Son of God who came to earth to help us. He went around doing good, teaching, healing people, doing the miraculous. And yet on Good Friday, He experienced the depth of betrayal that no other person ever has or ever will have. Everyone that He considered close to Him turned their back on Him. Even the ones who pledged, "I'll die for you, Jesus," when challenged, denied, "I don't even know who you're talking about." The very people that He came to save cried out for His blood. Even the soldiers who nailed Him to the cross made fun of Him and spit on Him and mocked Him and whipped Him. He responds with, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Jesus was able to do that. I'll say, "Oh, He was God." Well, yes, He was. But He was also man. Why was He able to endure that? Because I got to tell you, if it was me, there would have been some angels down here. If it was me, it wouldn't have even gotten that far. You're coming to do what to me? I don't think so. Jesus was able to endure the suffering of the cross because we are told this, He endured it for the joy set before Him. There was something that He saw beyond the cross. There was something that He knew that His present circumstance was not the end. And it's the same for us. We've got to be able to see that too. Your present circumstance is not the end. You may feel alone, but you are not abandoned. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And even though Jesus experienced death, thankfully, He also experienced resurrection. And because of that, you too can experience the hope that goes along with Good Friday. You can do that because you know God's promises are true for you. You can do that because you know God is always at work in your life. And you can do that because you know God has not forgotten you. Let's bow our heads.